have to ask you about the New York Times non-endorsement. As I
Hmm.
understand it, they had said that
Hmm.
they would no longer weigh in on with these kind of local election
Hmm.
endorsements. And then they did, suggesting that people not rank Zohran,
Hmm.
making sort of criticisms, like raising the criticisms of Cuomo that we've raised here, but not, unlike Zohran, not saying to not rank Cuomo. This article has been described as just convoluted and confused and really disgraceful and sort of a mark on the paper's sort of integrity. What were you most triggered by, aggrieved
I,
by when you looked at
I,
this? What
I
were the
mean,
takeaways?
I would say not so much a mark against their integrity because this is their editorial board's politics. Generally, they liked Michael Bloomberg. They supported Bloomberg's candidate Christine Quinn for mayor in 2013. They go a little bit left, but they've always been fairly hostile to the progressive left. So one end, it's kind of par for the course. I mean, I think people just probably don't know their editorial board political history that well. They're not riding to the rescue for progressive candidates at all. I do think the process was badly handled. That I agree with the critics. This was a very strange and confusing process. I have very mixed feelings about newspaper endorsements as a whole. I think there are good reasons for not doing them. But if you're not going to do them, you end it for everything. The idea that the New York Times is only going to endorse for presidents of the United States, eh, where it means literally nothing. Americans are not going to the New York Times to decide whether to vote for a Democrat or Donald Trump or JD Vance or anyone else. They're just not. In New York City, they do look to the Times to a degree. That is a role it plays. Now, if you want to abdicate that role, but stop endorsing in national races, stop endorsing for president. That's stupid. So I think it's foolish to just do president, not New York. Then don't misdirect and mislead the public. They announce we're not endorsing for mayor of New York City. Then they create this very strange process. They interview a bunch of candidates. Then they have this panel of experts issue kind of like a recommendation. Brad Lander wins the recommendation, but no one really knows what that is. It reminds me of when they co-endorsed Klobuchar and Warren. Everyone was like,
Mm-hmm.
what are you doing here?
Mm-hmm.
So that was all rather befuddling. And then on the week before the election to issue a non-endorsement endorsement where you condemn one of the leading candidates and then not condemn as strongly the candidate who had to resign from office for a sexual harassment scandal, that is very eyebrow raising. Now, is it shocking given their politics? Not really. I think the people in that editorial board would rather have the sexual harasser or accused of sexual harassment corrupt ex-governor than the Muslim socialist. That's just how they feel. But then issue a traditional endorsement. Just say we endorse Andrew Cuomo for mayor and get it over with. Own your decision. I think what
I think they
annoys a lot
can't.
of
I think,
people, well, they can't do it because he's Andrew Cuomo. So
yeah, it
then
looks too
don't
bad. Now, to be
so don't
clear,
fire bullets
so don't
at
say
the
anything
other
at all.
candidates. I think
Yeah.
that's where a lot of people are annoyed. Where okay, you're not supporting anyone, but you're attacking people. It's not really what endorsements typically do. Typically, you can attack a candidate, but at least you're endorsing someone else, right? You endorse Kamala Harris, then you say why Donald Trump's unfit. This whole process was really confounding because you're getting all of these really harsh attacks. They're being used in Cuomo campaign ads, by the way. The super PAC has taken that language and it's on TV. It's in, I'm sure it's in mail. And you've created fodder for Cuomo. You've effectively endorsed Cuomo without endorsing him. That is where a lot of
Yeah.
people are upset. That seems very
It's deeply
underhanded.
cowardly. It's
It's
deeply
cowardly. It
cowardly
is
because
cowardly.
the
Yes.
reason they can't come out and do it, or they're reluctant to come out and do it openly, is obvious. This man
Yes. That he's not.
is reviled. You know, the
Yes.
stigma against Cuomo is enormous, and the credibility of anybody endorsing him is on the ground. Now, interestingly, it just broke that Jim Clyburn,
Yeah.
came out with an endorsement of Cuomo, which is, I just, I, I don't even know what to do with that at this point. I mean, again,
Clyde.
not surprising.
So it was like Larry
Sorry,
Summers. Larry Summers, like, did you see Larry
I saw that
Summers
as well.
condemned? These are these sorts of like interventions where you almost have to laugh because it's like There's no Jim Clyburn vote. There's no Jim Clyburn vote in New York City. So,
No, but you know what the purpose of it's going to
but
be? It's going to be to
yes,
weaponize this idea that he represents black voters somehow. This one old man from
he's
South Carolina and another
right.
one of the poorest districts in the country that he's done absolutely nothing for in the 100 years that he's been in office there. But like
Yeah.
that, you can see what's happening. And this was a similar thing I wanted to bring up with you that there was this I guess it was a paper in this article this photo that had these implications because it was about Cuomo's union support, and it was a picture of the union members behind him or in this photograph, and the black union members kind of pushed up front, and it seems like it's
Yeah.
part of this same old 2016, 2020, how to kill the left story of
Yes.
pretending like business unionism, endorsing the establishment candidate, and their diverse representation within their ranks means that black people should vote for Cuomo. Clyburn's endorsement means black people should vote for Cuomo. And that's all it is.
Yes, but yeah, basically it is the coalescing of the power elite against Zoran. And yes, it's also, I think, exploiting kind of shallow racial politics, shallow labor politics. I mean, it's not surprising. I mean, it is a bit desperate. I'll say that. I mean, your campaign, you're probably worried if you're dragging Clyburn into the race in the 11th hour. It's not something a confident campaign does, put it that way. Or even getting Michael
Mm-mm.
Bloomberg to cut $8 million to a super PAC. You're not doing that against a guy who's down 25 points.
Yeah. Just for the sake of completeness, I want to actually read the quote from the non-endorsement from the Times. They write, "We do not believe that Mr. Mamdani deserves a spot on New Yorkers' ballots. His experience is too thin, and his agenda reads like a turbocharged version of Mr. de Blasio's dismaying mayorality." By the way, why did we all decide that we hated de Blasio?
Their hostility to Blasio is interesting because that was a little unexpected. I mean, they've always been more Bloomberg friendly, but the abject hatred for De Blasio was to me the most notable part of it in a way.
As a New Yorker, I never understood it. Like, as someone who wasn't as engaged in politics before, you know, you just heard
Yeah,
all the time that we're supposed
it,
to roll our eyes at de Blasio and he was
it's
supposed
very
to be some joke,
vibes
but I never
based.
understood
Yeah,
it.
it's very
Yeah.
based on kind of his personality, not really on his politics. It's kind of like, oh, he comes late, he goes to the gym, but there's nothing.
Yeah.
It was all much more vibes than people were mad about actual things he was doing.
Right. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and continue. As for Mr. Cuomo, we have serious objections to his ethics and conduct, even if he would be better for New York's future than Mr. Mamdani. Like, that sentence is insane. First of all, the downplaying of a sexual harassment scandal, the nursing home COVID scandal, as we have serious objections to his ethics and conduct. Okay, serious objections. Even if he would be better for New York's future than Mr. Mamdani. So Mamdani, to be clear, is being criticized as having having thin experience and being too much like Bill de Blasio, whatever that means, the guy who delivered universal pre-K. But he's still worse. He's worse than Cuomo, who has these, we're not going to explicitly name what they are, but serious objections to his ethics and conduct. Okay. They go on to say, for any voters tempted to leave both off their ballots, it's important to understand that this decision would be tantamount to expressing no preference between the two. It is similar to voting for neither major party candidate in a traditional election. If the polls are correct and the race is between Mr. Cuomo and Mr. Mamdani, the thing that matters most on a ballot will be, cut off. The thing that matters most on the ballot will be the relative positions of these two candidates. So again, this is where we get to the point where they're saying but not saying, don't rank Mamdani.
In essence, they wanted to go out of their way to, I think, to stop Zoran. I think that's what this editorial was about. They were probably maybe not even planning to do it, and they decided Zoran is doing too well, and we've got to get this out there. That would be my strong guess as to the thinking behind it.
The other hit piece, of course, maybe I shouldn't call it a hit piece, was the Ann Lowry piece in The Atlantic. It got a lot of the commentary
I
was
still
about
need
the
to read. I read Michael Powell's. I actually did not. People were making fun of it, but I actually did not read it. I didn't know what her take was. So RCD was bad. I don't know what her argument was.
Yeah, we won't get into that one too much. Yeah, it's a
Yeah,
criticism of ranked
yeah,
choice voting. It's titled "New York is
right,
not a democracy." People were making a lot of
right.
hay about the fact that she's married to Ezra Klein, who is, of course, going around touting the virtues of abundance. We recently did an abundance episode on this podcast, which was very well received. And if you haven't listened to it yet, I strongly recommend that you do. But it's been that dynamic is funny. Of course, okay, so people who note the connection to Ezra Klein then get pushed back because they say it's sexist to attribute her politics to her husband's politics in any way, et cetera, et cetera. That being said, when it comes to abundance, I think the last thing that I want to say about Zohran and his sort of political skill is that he has managed to get a lot of the abundance guys on board and claiming Zohran as an abundance bro because of moderating, you can characterize it this way, slightly on some of these like housing initiatives, while not actually conceding, I think, the points about the abundance book and abundance narrative that has really upset so many of us on the left. So agreeing to like common sense housing reform type of things without weighing in on the pernicious part of abundance, which is the part where they're trying to replace a kind of anti-oligarch messaging that's on the rise with we just need to deregulate actually to get things done, sort of typical neoliberal messaging. And I wonder, to me, that's evidence, again, of Zohran's sort of skill in knowing what to say and what not to say, something that I don't have. Because if I were Zohran, I don't know that I wouldn't have been tempted to be like, to be clear, I'm not an abundance bro.
Yeah. Yeah, he's not said that. It should be his final speech when he's at his election night party, maybe. Yeah, no, I mean, look, the housing politics are very interesting in New York. He has been calling for more housing, building more housing. I think he's also very focused on tenants' rights. For me, the main blind spot of abundance YIMBYism is that they don't really care a great deal about the tenant movement and the reality that tenants are at the mercy of landlords and they need protection, and you can't just have the market deciding everything when it comes to housing and rent. Yes, we do need to increase supply. That does matter, but you aren't just going to rapidly build enough so tenant protections don't matter. But I'd say Zohran is striking a decent balance between he's being a housing candidate, being someone who cares about tenants' rights, being someone who's not going to be running around a suburban neighborhood and saying, no housing here, no condos here, which is what Michael Bloomberg did. Michael Bloomberg downzoned much of New York City. He built a ton on the waterfront. That's why Williamsburg has these massive glass towers now. But a lot of the outer borough neighborhoods with more money that are whiter, they had their housing construction restricted quite aggressively. So Zohran will not be certainly pandering to the homeowner who doesn't want the 4-story apartment building nearby them. At the same time, I think he's acknowledging the reality that you've got to care about tenant protections too. If you don't, rents go up and people get evicted or they get harassed by their landlords until they leave.
Yeah. Well, look, it's really been, I think, a political education for us all to sort of watch the way Zohran's been moving. And, if he is successful, to your point, I think this will be the biggest thing that's happened to the left for a really long time. And I hope he is able to come back and help to teach us and go into other shows and teach the left more broadly how to replicate his success. I certainly am incredibly impressed with him from a communication standpoint, not just his ads, but how he's able to talk to the public. His response to a death threat that was made against him went mega viral over the last day or so, I think in part because of the authenticity that you mentioned and because of just how incredibly articulate he is.
I get messages that say the only good Muslim is a dead Muslim. I get threats on my life. On the people that I love. And I try not to talk about it. Because the function of racism, as Toni Morrison said, is distraction. My focus has always been on making this a city that's affordable, on making this a city that every New Yorker sees themselves in. And it takes a toll. Because this is a city that every single person deserves to be in. It's a city that we all belong to. And the thing that's made me proudest in this campaign is that the strength of our movement is built on our ability to have built something across Jewish and Muslim New Yorkers, across New Yorkers of all faiths and all backgrounds and all boroughs. And anti-Semitism is such a real issue in the city. And it has been hard to see it weaponized by candidates who do not seem to have any sincere interest in tackling it, but rather in using it as a pretext to make political points. And that's what I've tried to share.
Thank you so much.
I mean, I think the bar has been kind of lowered over the years for that in the context of politics. And I don't mean this as a dig at AOC, but you know, when she came along, she was a breath of fresh air. And Zohran honestly just blows everyone out of the water on that front, as far as I'm concerned. And it's really impressive to watch. That being said, actually, there was a little bit of a theory that AOC's late endorsement might speak to a sense of threat that he might come for her crown, that she's not going to be the heir apparent to the Bernie movement if Zohran successfully wins this race. What do you make of that?
I think she's a bit wary of him. When I watched the endorsement speech he gave, she didn't say very much about him. It's very interesting
Right.
watching that at Terminal 5, where she spoke about Cuomo. She mentioned meeting Zohran about a year ago, but didn't really say much more. She said, we have to elect Zohran. I support him. But typically in these sorts of endorsement speeches, you sing the praise of the person. You talk about what a great person they are, how smart they are, how talented, or just how good on the issues they are. You know, you give some anecdotes, none of that.
We will never get to a better place if everyone's just worried about themselves and making decisions that are selfish. If it's over, so be it. We have the decisions before us today. Rank everyone on your ballot. Just in the last day or two, Zohran announced that he and Brad Lander are coming together to cross-endorse in a historic and first-time incident that we've seen of this. It is so important. This is what coalition politics is all about. We don't have to be in complete agreement. We don't have to come from the same places. We don't have to police complete conformity with one another's ideas. We must come together to win. So Zohran is asking you, if you rank him number 1, please rank Brad Lander number 2. And on the rest of that note, what I also find so shocking and surprising about all of this, in terms of the decisions of our political establishment, is that they actually had a broad field of talented candidates from so many different ideas. People that I also support. Zellner Myrie is awesome. State Senator Myrie is incredible. Scott Stringer, you ever have a conversation with that guy? He's so funny. He's like, I love Scott. You know, we have so many incredible candidates, and yet, look.
So if I had to guess, and I'm speculating, that politicians who are ambitious don't like when there are rising stars in their backyard. And he is in her backyard. He sits in an assembly district that overlaps their congressional district. He is someone whose star power is approaching hers. Now, she's still number 1, but win or lose with this race, he's going to have pole position. He's going to be close to her. And if I had to guess, she doesn't love the idea of someone who's close in age, who has the same politics. I mean, Zohran's interesting because he is more to the left of her. In many ways, he's more radical, certainly on Israel-Palestine. At the same time, because he is so articulate, he is so charismatic, he's so savvy, kind of has this Obama ability to make moves towards the middle, or at least build a broad-based movement. They both have star power. She's a star, he's a star. I don't know, and she's not alone. I think most politicians are positioned would be kind of looking over their shoulder. Okay, so there's another person in my backyard who also can go on the Late Show, who can also hang with celebrities, who can also give a speech in front of 30,000 people. There's really nothing that she can do that he cannot do. And now we know raising money is something he can do too. Um, so she, if I had to guess, she probably would have preferred Brad Lander rocket up to number one or number two, if I had to really guess. But that didn't happen, and she had to endorse Zohran. In a way, she was forced to, because everyone
She
in
was
her
forced
district
to.
is so everyone in the Queen side of her district, I should say, is supporting Zohran Mamdani. Everyone in the progressive leftist socialist space is supporting him. So for her to not would be, a career damager, if not an ender, it'd be a damager certainly. Um, and I don't know, maybe she might resent that, right? How many people want to be dragged into an endorsement, which she was, and she was dragged into an
So,
endorsement.
so Ross, you're saying all of our tweeting and tagging her in, saying why haven't you endorsed yet, actually worked.
I don't want to give myself to. I don't want to. I think what I'll say more than that is that she is smart and she understands politics, and she understands that it was untenable to not endorse Zohran for mayor. Number one. Number one, it was untenable by May. I think she was waiting probably to see if maybe it could be tenable to do Brad number one. She likes Brad,
Mm-hmm.
and Brad's not a threat. So that's my assumption, that she was waiting. She was watching it evolve, and it became very clear that there was no way to be a leader of the progressive movement and not support Zohran for mayor,
Yeah, I
especially since
like I
she's in New
like
York City.
yeah, I like you saying that she's going not in my backyard. AOC the NIMBY when it comes to Zohran Mamdani is a very funny way to put it.
In her defense, I think most politicians would feel that way. It is very threatening when you are at the head of a movement
I don't
and
know, man.
someone else is right there doing all the things you can do and maybe do them better. I'm not saying you attack that person or you undercut them, but it makes you think twice. A lot of politicians, they have egos and they want to be the top dog. And if there's another person right there who's your age almost, who is exciting the same sort of people, who is a threat to do things, right? I mean, you can embrace it. Some might embrace it, but I think there's also
Yeah, but that's
awareness
that's the
as
thing.
well.
Like I
There's a
think
competitiveness.
normatively what you're saying is correct. That's how most politicians are. The kind of person who
Hmm.
becomes a politician thinks that way, feels that way. But that's
Hmm.
a bummer, man. And what I liked
Yeah.
about Bernie Sanders was that he always felt like a very reluctant leader. Like, yeah, I would
Yes.
prefer if somebody else could do it. Won't
Yes.
anybody else do it? I guess I'll do it. And that's what
He's
made
unique
him
that
seem like
way.
someone with integrity.
Yes.
Sorry?
Yes. Yes. Bernie did care if there were other stars. Bernie was not. Bernie really does not have an ego. I mean, you can criticize Bernie, but he's not like driven. I think he's earnest about his positions. I think AOC is earnest too, but I think she has an ego. I think Zoran has an ego too. I'm not saying Zoran is this an egoless person, but what I'm saying is she was the star. She's the unquestioned number one celebrity politician in New York and maybe in America. And now, lo and behold, there's a second celebrity politician who's also on the left, who's also now famous in New York and slowly becoming famous throughout America. Um, I I think there could be some resentment there. It puts her in just a weird position, right, where someone is both to the left of you, but they're able to be just as mainstream as you, and in
Yeah,
some
it
ways
disproves the
out
wisdom
communicate
of her
you.
triangulation. It
It's
disproves
interesting. It's interesting.
it makes it reveals the moral bankruptcy of compromising and the ways that she's compromised with things like the early Biden endorsement long before what should have been a primary season. With things like saying Kamala Harris is tirelessly working towards a ceasefire. I mean,
Yeah,
one of the more
those are
notable
moves that
moments
didn't age well.
right. And so the wisdom of her taking those positions or overforce the vote where she says, well, I'm reserving my political capital. When you see someone who is not reserving their political capital in those ways and who is willing to, in the moment, say the thing that they really believe in, it's just sometimes politically unpopular, the way that Bernie did so many times over the course of his career, and to be rewarded for doing so, it reveals the moral bankruptcy of her own choices. And I, too, if I had made those choices, would be feeling a little uncomfortable in the tummy. But I also just want to say the sky should be filled with stars. We should be wanting so many stars.
You need more stars.
I don't know how. Like,
I'm also speculating. Maybe she just loves him. I don't know. I'm going off of what I see.
No, you were there at Terminal 5. I wasn't, but I watched it on TV.
She said almost nothing about him. Almost nothing.
She said nothing about him. She weirdly kept complimenting Brad Lander in the middle of the Zohran speech.
Yes.
And then she was sort of forced by the audience to say "Free Palestine," which she looked uncomfortable about saying.
I want to be clear about the message that sends. When they do that, free Palestine as well. But I want to be clear. I want to be clear.
Yeah, that's all true. No. I'm trying just to give some sort of support to whatever other side there is in this debate. But yeah, I mean that's my read on the situation. It was a constrained endorsement. You and I have watched a lot of these speeches, and they tend to be effusive. And this was not effusive. This was like, I'm here for this guy because Cuomo is bad, but also we've got other good candidates. But support this guy because you're all here for him, and I'll say his name a few times. But hey, Zellner, Myrie, and Brad Lander are good too, and so let's stop Cuomo. And that was kind of the contours of her, which in a way, actually, I was a bit surprised. I thought she'd give more to Zohran than she did, especially if in the speech she was building to it. It felt like where we got together a year ago, we'd met. And the anecdote, if just kind of ended. There wasn't like, oh, I met Zohran, he was so great, and I knew he'd be successful, and he believes in so much, and it just kind of moved to Cuomo. So yeah, I mean, the read on the speech and the late endorsement is they are not terribly close, but for now they're going to have to be on the same side because Zohran is not going to go against AOC, but also AOC can't go against him. But that is a fact.
Yeah.
He's too big to be opposed by AOC. That cannot happen. So they'll be at this detente until, I don't know, there's some future when they somehow come into conflict, and maybe there'll be some, who knows, maybe there's a foreign policy conflagration in the future, hopefully not, where Zohran comes down on one side and she's more quiet, or she pushes him somewhere, or he pushes her somewhere, I should say. That might also happen where, I don't recall her doing much for the uncommitted movement or anything, whereas Zohran was deeply involved in it. So, different. They are different. They're not the same. They have similarities, but they're also not the same.
Hey, YouTube. Thanks for watching. Just a reminder that this is a podcast. You can catch an extra premium episode every Monday for $5 a month at patreon.com/badfaithpodcast. That's patreon.com/badfaithpodcast for $5 a month, an extra episode every week. Additionally, please do consider liking this video, subscribing to this channel. It helps us out. It helps independent media beat the algorithm. We appreciate you. And as always, keep the faith.